Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Late Night Hockey with Steven Psihogios. I'm your host, Steven Psihogios, and tonight I'm joined by a very special guest, a very good friend of mine, Gene Pereira. Gene and I were on the Barrie Colts broadcast back during the 2015-16 season. Gene's been doing it since as far back as I can remember. He's been a staple in the Barrie community here, one of the most plugged-in guys when it comes to the Ontario Hockey League. Gene, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to have you, a good friend, on the show today.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Steven. And look, I got to say, for two guys, old guys have been around back together back in the Barrie days, we're still looking pretty dapper. So that's the good thing, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Gene, you're like a fine wine. Just get
Like a
better with
fine wine.
age. You're like a fine wine. So let's dive into the first topic. And like I mentioned, Gene's one of the most plugged in guys when it comes to the Ontario Hockey League. And there was a lot of news regarding the league this past week when you had the Minister of Tourism and Sport, Lisa MacLeod, announced that there's going to be a grant given to the Ontario Hockey League, $2.35 million to help support the league's scholarship fund, which for every year of eligibility a player plays in the OHL, they gain 1 year towards a Canadian university. So obviously a big announcement. I think it works out to just under $150,000 per team, because it only goes to the 17 Ontario-based teams. There's 3 teams, obviously, in the States that won't be receiving the scholarship funds. So, Gene, just your thoughts on that decision from the government. Obviously, with no spectators, which, as we know, is a huge driver for funds in the OHL and for revenue, this is definitely an appreciated, from the OHL's perspective, an appreciated grant from the government.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, the OHL is always kind of, education is a big part for their players and make sure that they get their education. And, with no hockey and no fans, the revenue hasn't been there. And this will help replace that and make sure that these players, get the money needed to go to school in the future. And, again, when you look at it, the provinces has helped out other businesses, the federal government as well. And I think this money is certainly going to help. And, education is a big part for these guys. They give up a lot through the OHL, and, a lot of them go on to play, in school and as well graduate, and, it helps with their career. So it's nice to see them kind of get that bump and ensure that money is going to be there for their schooling.
Yeah, I know just from covering Ryerson and even covering the OUA and following the league still, tons of former OHLers play in that league, and it's a great benefit of playing in the OHL, because obviously the focus during that time, you're so hockey driven and you're so focused on hockey that it's nice to also know that there's a path for schooling as well after it. Obviously, it's such a small percent of players end up going pro, let alone just the NHL, just the pro levels as it is. So it's good to know that there's the school route for these players to take advantage of as well. And another thing I wanted to talk about, and the Minister of Tourism and Sport alluded to this as well, was that later this month we could have some more details regarding hub cities and what a return to play plan would look like. Gene, obviously there's not a whole lot right now at this time, and even David Branch has said that he doesn't want to get too far ahead of himself, because areas like Kitchener and London have talked about potentially being hub cities and willing to be hub cities for a potential OHL bubble system. What are your thoughts on this potential hub city style of play, and what have you heard about this?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's really the only way they're going to be able to come back and get in some games this season. When you look at it, I think they're looking either 4 or 5 cities, have 4 teams, maybe in each city, 5 teams. Everybody's going to stay. When you take Kingston could be a possibility. I think they're going to be arenas that have the ability to kind of, take in 4 or 5 teams with equipment wise, and then also has a hotel, nearby, maybe one that the players can walk to, and create that kind of bubble where the players can stay in the hotel, eat in the hotel, and then come over to the rink and play that. Whether I know they talked about maybe 24 games, it's down to 20 games. But when you look at it, I think the other big part of that, Stephen, is that, right now is money. I think financially, the costs of doing this, while some of the bigger OHL teams in revenue there's going to be no fans, obviously, so that revenue, and you have to replace it. And, the cost for hotel and food and putting up all these players. And the other big cost, I think, which is right now, I'm sure that they're negotiating through, is testing. I think the province is going to want the players tested to ensure that everybody kind of gets in that bubble. And, you saw the success of it with the NHL in the playoffs when they did it there. And I think that was encouraging to see that it can work. But again, that testing comes at a big cost. And when you take in hotel bills, food bills, and so on, that's a big part of the negotiation. But it's obviously got to be a bit of a positive thing for fans when they heard Lisa McLeod, with optimism. It's been tough. It's been tough watching, the Quebec League, they came back right at the start, but then they were delayed. The Western Hockey League coming back, the NHL's back. So I think everybody's hoping the NHL will get back. But again, I think when you look at it, I don't think there's any doubt that Dave Branch, you got to take the safety of the kids in hand. You got to have a proper program, and it's taken a little bit of time, but it seems like they're going to get there.
Yeah, and both those leagues have kind of taken a hybrid approach. When you look at the WHL, they have some hub cities and they have some teams playing at the home arenas. And it's the same with the QMJHL, where you have the Atlantic teams playing at their home arenas, but the Quebec-based teams playing in their hub cities. And what brings an interesting question, and kind of talked about some of the discrepancies that could happen. I mentioned it earlier. There's 3 U.S.-based teams. That obviously is a major challenge for the league to negotiate, given the border situation right now. I was wondering if there's anything that you've heard or anything that you think would work in order to keep these U.S. teams afloat, not necessarily afloat, but keep them in the mix and give them a season as well.
Yeah, I think that, what you're going to see is probably them coming over, taking part in these hub cities, but it's not just the provincial government. You're going to have to get clearance from the federal government to bring in these players back. But, you see players that are over the OHL playing over in Europe now coming back. So it's something that I think they should be able to work through, bring the European players in. And it's another consideration as well. When you look at a timeline here, when talking to some of the GMs, they said that they're going to need, you got to have that 2 weeks, that quarantine time for the players to return. And as well, I think you're going to need a couple of weeks of a camp, because a lot of these players really haven't been practicing or playing. And I think that'll be key. You don't want players kind of stepping in cold right into a season that could lead to injuries. So I think they're going to need at least a couple of weeks. So, the timeline moves back, but at the end of the day, what's the difference? I think if you get 20 games in, and, I think that's what they look at. I think that's a lot of this is about the kids. You got to feel from kids like Luke Bignell and Barry, these overagers that, we saw the overagers last year get their season wiped out in the playoffs, not able to make that last playoff run. And I think they really here this year want to do it for those kids. And, as well for kids like Brant Clark, and this is their draft year and a chance for scouts to see them. And now the Quebec League's going, you got the Western Hockey League going. So, with the draft, very important for a lot of these kids. So you want to give them the same opportunity, and you got to do it safely. And I think that has to do a lot with testing. The money has to be there for the testing, but, get the bubble cities set up, the hub cities set up. And, the big question is we go back and forth, what cities. I think Hamilton, when you look at their facility, is a good setup. London's always one, that everybody kind of loves going to, the arena and the whole setup there. But maybe even, Niagara could be there, Oshawa, another city that maybe that, you got to wonder, is there going to be a Mem Cup? Because with this timeline being pushed back, that kind of puts that, in a lot of doubt now about whether there'll be a Memorial Cup.
Yeah, that's a big question mark. And something else, too, that's a big question mark is whether or not body contact will be allowed. We remember earlier when the Ontario government, this was back in October, November, they were discussing what a potential plan would look like for an OHL season. It didn't include any body contact, and there's been no real indication that that idea is going to be rescinded. What are your thoughts on a potential OHL season with no body contact? Obviously, at this point, any hockey is better than none, especially for you have overagers, like you mentioned, and draft eligible players. But what are your thoughts on a potential season without body contact and the thoughts on that rule in general?
Yeah, it's tough to see hockey without any kind of body contact. I mean, just the incidental stuff. It's gonna happen. You're gonna get, wherever that puck is gonna go, you're gonna get bodies in there chasing the puck. So they're gonna be in close proximity, and that's something to consider. And I think they can work through that. Again, if you get the players into a bubble where they're not going out publicly, what you can do is you can test them before going in, make sure everybody's clean. They stay in that bubble. And then once they stay in that bubble, I think that opens up to carrying the game on with regular contact on the ice. I think that's the difference. Whereas if you got everybody kind of going back home, going out, that type of thing, it changes. But I think with a bubble system, they saw it in the NHL with the playoffs that it can work. They did testing all the time there. And once you get the players together in that room, I know I was talking to Todd Miller, former Colts interim head coach. He's out with the Brandon Wheat, and they're in Saskatchewan right now. They're at the university, and he was telling me they were in a dorm, and maybe the dorm food wasn't great. I think they said they were going to finally, get some better food. That seemed to be the only complaint. He said it seemed to work well. The guys were in there. They were together. They weren't, like I said, they're not going out into the public where you don't get that spread. And I think once you get them into those bubbles, when you look at it on the ice, then that kind of takes away that question on the ice. Is you can allow them to play the game, as they play it, with no concerns that there'll be a spread.
Yeah, as someone who's just finished 4 years of university, trust me, I know exactly what he's talking about when he says the dorm food is not up to standards. Because I mean, you know what? It's on the meal plan, and I've already loaded up the card, so I've got to get it. But it's not because I have a wealth of options, that's for sure. So I totally know where he's coming from with that. But also with this bubble, the one big question I think everyone is wondering, like you hear later this month is the start date. Now, do you think that we could potentially hear something sooner, or do you think really it's going to be a matter of just waiting it out through this month and then we'll hear when we hear it, or do you think potentially things could get moving a little bit faster on this?
They could be faster. I think we saw the province step up and help with the education funds. I think they're going to need to step up and help the OHL as well with the return to play, some money for the return to play. And we saw that in the Western Hockey League, we saw it in the Quebec League, and I think you're going to have to see some again to pay those costs, a hotel, to pay the, to set up those hub cities can be expensive, and there's not going to be any fans. So the revenue source hasn't been there. There hasn't been for a year. So I think that's of concern to the OHL teams. And, I think that's probably the big part of it is and it sounds encouraging, like the province kind of understands that. And I think Lisa McLeod did mention that they're going to have to talk about that and kind of figure out what the proper way to help the teams. So you saw the Quebec League. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's kind of one of the, that, and I think the testing, making sure that they got the proper testing, they got the hub cities set up so that they're not going out into the public. And if they can assure the province that they can follow the protocols and then financially get that kind of figured out as well with the costs. Again, the costs dip a bit here with a shorter season, so you help out maybe some of the smaller, revenue teams in the league as well, and make it easier for them to come back.
So great job. Always great insight there, Gene, on the OHL situation. We'll shift gears. You're wearing the Hawerchuk Strong hat. No one in the media really covered the abruptly final chapter of Dale Hawerchuk's career better than you did, or closer than you did. You've been a staple, as I mentioned earlier, in the Barrie community for quite a long time, covering the Barrie Colts, and you for years covered Dale Hawerchuk as well. And obviously his sudden passing last year struck a lot of people and hit a lot of people hard. I always say, I remember Rick Bowness from the Dallas Stars tearing up behind the bench when the Stars played later that day. It was a very emotional day for a lot of people. And like I said, you covered Dale very well throughout the final chapter of his hockey career, which was head coach of the Barrie Colts. What can you say about Dale Hawerchuk and the type of person he was?
Yeah, I'm not honestly not surprised at all to see that type of emotion. Being fortunate to get to know Dale Hawerchuk, the person. I mean, obviously, a legend in the hockey circles, an NHL Hall of Famer, an outstanding player. But as a coach, you really saw it with the players. They loved him. And I know when Dale passed away and I was reaching out to some of the players, the Mark Scheifele's, the Kevin LeBancs, the Aaron Ekblads, they're all eager to reach out and tell them just about what a fine mentor that they lost. And even the current players, talked about him. As he was battling cancer, he would come to the rink, stop by. The players loved it. They loved it when he came in the room. And it was a huge boost for the club to see their coach and getting through. And Steven, like that, I still remember going to camp, and then Dale wasn't there, and it's okay, what's going on? And then word came out that he was fighting cancer, and I think it was tough for everyone to see. But then, you saw him, he went through the chemo, and I remember talking to him at the Christmas time, and he said he had the big surgery coming up. He had talked to people, he had done research. He's going to have his stomach removed, and how it would change his eating habits and so on. But he was looking forward to it. He was excited. He was ready for the. It's one thing you learn about Dale is that the courage and the strength and the fight in this guy. I mean, he was ready for it, and he went in and had the surgery. And I remember talking to him after, and no more big meals, And I remember him saying, but he went through it, and then unfortunately, the cancer came back, and then it went really quick from there. And that was tough. That was tough. I mean, it was emotional. I mean, when you talk to Jason Ford and Todd Millers and the people that were in the organization, it was really hard. I mean, they were, Dale wasn't just a co-worker. He was a really good friend. And I think that's the tough part. Even for myself personally, I was fortunate to get to know Dale. And, it was tough. It was tough seeing him go through that. And, in the battle. And, you didn't hear the stories of him reaching out to players and messages. I know I talked to Mark Scheifele at of course on his golf course at 7 in the morning. But he talked about how just Dale loved it on the ice every morning at when Mark played. The players that weren't in school, they'd go out and play shinny, and Dale would get laced up the skates. And Mark said, it was like he wouldn't let us win anything. There was still that competitive fire in him. And, and he said you could really see Dale was loving it, just being out on the ice again. And, Mark says it's something he'll always remember, forever. And then just, when he Barry acquired his rights from Saginaw, and Dale met with him and his mom. And he told me that when he walked out, he said, I'm playing for that guy. And that was Dale. Like, he just had a way of motivating players. Kevin LeBanc, LeBanc said at the time he was struggling him, and he said Dale would always go by and sit by him and say, you're not this guy. This is going to pass. You're too good, and stuff. And he just had that way of giving you that confidence and the lift. And he was a player's coach. The players loved him, and he could be firm. He had his messages straight, and he wanted. But the bottom line is he was trying to help you. Like, I think what Dale took the greatest satisfaction is just seeing his players go being important parts of the community. It meant a lot to Dale, to you. And, you saw that Aaron Ekblad, he had a great message for the players. And, one of them, Aaron, was said, the thing, he talked to him a few days before he had passed away. He goes, Aaron, I just, make it clear that, we're very privileged to play this game at a high level and to be paid very well for it, to play a game that we just love doing, that we play for free. And he's just told Aaron, remember, always help out people in need. We're in that position that we can reach out and help a lot of people. And, that's the message he left Aaron with, was just remember that you can help others. And, that was Dale to a T. I mean, that was him to a T. And, it's a huge loss, I think, for the hockey world and, for the city of Barrie, because it was fun to watch him. I think we're going to lose. At one point, we're going to lose him to the NHL, because I don't think there's any doubt he was going to go in that direction. But he's a heck of a man. And like I said, I got really fortunate to get to know Dale for a few years there. And I really understand why so many people loved and cared about him.
Yeah, I mean, that last story just tells you exactly the type of person he was. Last message was make sure you give back. And yeah, it was just a very emotional day around the entire hockey world. And I'm glad that, you're able to share your insight. Like I said, no one really covered that last final chapter of his hockey career better than you did as far as from a media standpoint. So yeah, it's even from my brief experience, it was only one season covering the Colts. He was just a very generous man, especially with his time. He was always willing to do an interview, and me being a rookie, walk through things and kind of have an understanding that, he was just a very understanding person. So agreed. It's just someone that definitely we lost too soon. And the hockey world is a worse place without him. It's not near. He was such a big. He had such a big impact on the hockey world. So he's has been missed, and he will continue to be missed by many. So
If I can just add one little quick story here,
yeah,
Steve.
yeah.
He had a great sense of humor, and he had these one-liners. And and if you know Dale, he's kind of like he's not a boisterous guy and stuff. I sat and talked to him before, but they had gone into Niagara and they got handed to him. I think it was like 7-0 after the first period, and this is in the early years. And the next day they were back at home, and Dale walked into the media room before the game. He'd sometimes go get a coffee and 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 I kind of that was a bit of a tough one last night, Dale. And just being Dale, he said, Gene, he says, he goes, there's a time there after they scored that 7th goal in the first period, I was looking if I could dig a trench or somewhere I could disappear on the bench, and it's just really hard. I mean, obviously he came up from after working with the Orangeville organization there, and he's so competitive, and he had that sense of humor, the way to kind of lighten the mood. And that was him there. He was just like, he says, the camera's on me. It didn't give me a second because I would have dug a trench now. I would have dug my way out of there. But that was Dale, and it was just a lot of fun to be around.
Yeah, and like I said, the hockey world is the worst place without him, and he's definitely missed by so many. And yeah, he was a great guy. So it is really sad. And not to make the show overly, an influx of sad topics, but your latest work as well, it is a sad story. Daniel Miner, 32 years old, a former Barrie Colt, recently passed away. Just a sad story as well. Gone so young, and Brian Little, the current Winnipeg Jets forward, who's currently out, you were able to talk to him, and he talked so much about the impact Daniel Miner had on him in his playing days and how their relationship lasted much longer than just their junior career.
Yeah, Daniel had passed away last Friday, and just suddenly, and just reaching out to some of his former teammates. And the thing with Daniel, he didn't play. I think he got into some 30-odd games with the Barrie Colts over a couple of years, a couple of games 1 year, and then he got a bit of a taste of the OHL. He had a great set of hands. He could score, and maybe you talk to Andrew Perugini, just great hands in front of the net. He was just he didn't miss often, and but he tried to work his way into it. But his skating wasn't up to maybe the OHL levels, and but when you talk to his teammates, he was such a good teammate, and that's what they talked about. They remember that standing out. And Brian Little was one of the guys that they obviously they struck up a friendship, and he used to give in a minivan, used to give Brian a ride to practice his games. The movies the team went to together. So obviously he got to know him. And when he started in Atlanta, Daniel came down to see him in Atlanta, and they got the opportunity to kind of go out, and he brought Daniel to a game, and he said, he goes, that was great watching him because he got a Ilya Kovalchuk stick, and just giving him that opportunity. Looking back, he's going to remember that fondly. Just looking at Daniel Miner's face, and just how much he loved being in that dressing room, and being able to share that experience with him meant a lot to him. And again, this is a guy, Marty Williamson talked about. He was always just a pleasurable, such a nice kid. And, he went back to Dunnville, coached Dunnville minor hockey, played, a year of junior B after he had done his career. And, just a young family, a young son, and he leaves behind. And it's really a tragedy, but I think his son's going to grow up and, look back at some of the things people have said about his dad and know that he was a good man. And, he's just, he loved boating and fishing. His family, I think, had a fishing business, going back in the Port Colborne, Dunnville area. And so, it goes back to that. But, again, it just goes to show, really says something about who Daniel Miner was as a person, that so many people want to, to reach out and talk about him, his ex-teammate core that, maybe, Brian said it's really unfortunate I lost touch with him there for a bit after, because he says we brought him down to Atlanta and he was such a great, genuine, nice person. And, he's going to be missed.
Definitely. Thoughts and prayers with the Miner family and those close to them. Just a tough story, but I definitely wanted to budget some time on the show. Gene, he's a huge Blackhawks fan, been a huge Chicago Blackhawks fan all his life. And I want to keep the,
Love Dave Bull.
I
love Dave Bull.
Dave Bull, as you can see by my Bruins jersey, not a big fan of Dave Bolland. And I want to see, I'm going to try my best to keep this about the recent Chicago Blackhawks. I'm talking the last 7 games where they've lost 6 of their last 7. I don't want to go 7, 8 years back. I'm thinking about staying 7 years, but Gene, I'm going to ask you this, knowing full well that this is not, I'm not going to get a remark that is proper for the subject, but what do you make of the Chicago Blackhawks this season? A surprise team overall when you look at the larger body of work, but they have run into a bit of a rut right now.
Yeah, they got off to a good start this season, and obviously, without 2 of their big centers, Jonathan Toews, their captain and their leader, and Kirby Doc, who just got injured in camp with the World Canadian Junior team. So, it's been a big loss. They got off to a good start. And, I think this is a team that's kind of gone through the last couple of years not knowing whether to rebuild or not. They're kind of stuck in that halfway because you have like the Duncan Keith and, we just had Brett Seabrook retire lately. So they've kind of gone through that. And, I think they're still to a good start. Some good young players. When you look at them, obviously the Brinkat, a name that a lot of OHL fans recognize with Erie, he's really got off to a great start this year. And, I think for Chicago now, they're kind of going through 6-7 games, maybe coming down to earth a bit to what they are. And when you're facing a team like Tampa Bay and, those Florida Panthers, they can't beat Florida. It's just,
a lot of teams have had that problem.
A lot of teams have had that problem, and I might have to talk with Aaron Ekblad, to take it easy on them. But, obviously, I think for them, they're kind of in that rebuilding phase. I think a lot of youth, you're starting to see them bring up their young defensemen now, which is something that they recognizing with Seabrook and Keith getting older and, having moved Sharmelson that type before. Boakfus is really starting to come into his own, still struggles a bit defensively. But, for young guys, what you got to do, it has to get to a point where you just got to kind of send them out there. And Mitchell's another one, that a big young guy on the blue line, give him that experience. But, if they can find a way to make the playoffs for them, I think it's a gain. I don't think they're by any stretch a Stanley Cup contender. And I think they're still going to be facing that decision, what to do, if Jonathan Toews, hopefully he does return. I think Doc's close to returning. That's going to help them. But what do you do with the Patrick Kanes? And, they've always been lifelong Hawks. And, it's always a tough decision what you do with those kind of veterans, especially with the history they had and the Stanley Cup wins that they've had. What do you do? But, when you look at what a Patrick Kane could bring back in a trade for a young rebuilding team, that's a big question. But, hopefully Jonathan Toews can find a way to get back here. It doesn't look like he's going to come back this year. It's a big decision that he's going to have to make. And unfortunately for the Hawks, Marian Hossa, Seabrook have had to retire. Hopefully that's not the case with Jonathan Toews.
And Gene, before I wrap up, I always introduce this one section. It's called guest choice, which means the guest gets to choose to talk about whatever they want. And I've got a feeling, Gene, I know exactly what the guest choice is going to be today. I just got a feeling that I know where this is going to go. But anyways, the floor is yours. If you want, you can talk about anything you like right now, hockey related. What's on your mind, Gene?
I want to turn around and ask you a question.
Okay, a little
Which
reversal of the rules.
which goal did you like better of Dave
Oh.
Bolden's 2 goals, 17 seconds? Was the first or the second that, just shortly before Chicago hoisted the Stanley Cup in Boston?
No comment. I remember watching that as a Bruins fan, and just you get late in that game. There's under 2 minutes. You're like, okay, you're thinking game 6, looking good. Probably, your mind starts thinking ahead, right? All right, game 7, and then here comes the wrecking Boland. He just came in and wrecked everything, and I just remember thinking after, like what did I just watch? Like 17 seconds. It all happened so fast.
Glorious.
Oh my goodness. Too soon, Gene. Too soon.
Well, in saying that, I mean, I became a Blackhawks fan because my dad, and I was a huge fan. I show my age here, but Stan Mikita, when I was a kid, was my favorite player, and he really got me into hockey. And my dad loved the Blackhawks, and unfortunately, he had passed away. He didn't get to see this cup run, and which was too bad because there's a lot of grief before that.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
There's a lot of years.
Yeah.
And when they won that first cup, honestly, Steven, it was a special moment for my family. Just because we knew my dad up there was probably watching, knowing that he got to see his Hawks finally win a cup. And, and it's funny now because the biggest Hawk fan in our family now is my mom. And, there'll be times I admit like the Hawks are on TV, but I got something else I want to do, whatever. And not her. She's like every game, she's got the Hawks are on that she's watching. And, like I said, it was kind of, watching these recent cup victories, and especially that first one, just knowing, how my dad would have loved it. And, you grow up and your parents have a lot of influence you. And I fortunately, for my father, it was a big influence for me. And, he brought the Blackhawk, fans out of all of us, except my one brother was a Rangers fan, which I could never understand. It's not like they were winning cups or anything, right?
No.
So I can never understand how he became a Rangers fan. The rest of us are Chicago fans, but I did talk to him about, kind of like, finding some other family to adopt him when we were younger. But, again, I mean, I look back in the fondness and that Patrick Kane goal. And like I said, that great series, the Boston Bruins. And it was a lot of fun watching them be competitive. And, it's a lot better than take a quick little story here is years ago, they went up against Pittsburgh in the Stanley Cup final. And, of course, Pittsburgh had Lemieux and Yager and Stevens and Larry Murphy. They were just loaded. And, I kind of realistically knew Chicago didn't have a chance, but Chicago, I think, had won 14 straight in the playoffs. And game 1, of all the things, a friend of mine up in Barrie, he wants me to help him build his patio, like help him build him a deck. And I said, you got to be crazy. It's game 1 of the Stanley Cup. I haven't seen Chicago playing a Stanley Cup in years. And you're telling me that I'm going to be out doing this deck. So, but he convinced me. He said, look, he goes, I'll put a TV out there, so we're out building the deck. And I think Chicago in game 1 had a 2 or 3-1 lead after 2 periods. And, he looked at me, he goes, holy geez. He goes, your Hawks might actually win the Stanley Cup. He goes, they look great. And sure enough, it got dark enough. So we went back inside for the 3rd period. And, unfortunately, Lemieux and Yager said, okay, enough.
They turned it on after.
They turned it on. They won that game 1, and they ended up sweeping Chicago. And when you go back, my dad was so upset. And I said, look, at least they made the cup. But, for my dad, it didn't matter. He goes, what's the use? If you're not going to get swept in the Stanley Cup, why did you go? That was my, so you look back and, that was that was a great memory, and just to see them win the cup was special. And I'm sure somewhere my dad up there was pretty happy.
Yeah, I've got a similar story too. My dad, when I grew up, big Bruins fan, always a big Bob Orr fan, and you know, you grow up and you live in the house with him. It's hard not to become a Bruins fan. I mean, my mom, we all cheer for the Bruins. But it's funny now because you said your mom is the biggest Blackhawks fan. You know, my grandmother has become the biggest Bruins fan I know. Like, I gotta call. I'll call her. I'll tell her when the games are on, and the best, the best to me is when they lose, because I'll call her the next day, and she's the biggest critic. Like, I'll say, I didn't think they played too bad, and she's got a thick Greek accent, so
Yeah,
you know she's trying her best to piece the words together, but she's so upset about how they played. Like, she'll just go into description describing how they weren't good and all that. So she's taken a real loving to the Bruins, and it's great. It's and this is what we love about hockey, right? Is it's able to bring us together like that, and it was able to bring us together for a great episode of Late Night Hockey. Gene, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to catch up. It had been way too long since I've seen you, because obviously it's hard to get out to a rink these days. But Gene, thanks so much for coming on the show tonight. It's really appreciated.
Steven, it's great to see you, my friend, and great to see you're doing well. And I always check you out, and it's great to see you doing well. And hey, look, if you want, I'll get your dad and you a Dave Bullen jersey, just so you can hang them up, and just something to kind of keep the memories there of that 17 seconds.
Oh, you're so generous, Gene. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank
Thanks,
you.
my friend. You take care.
Yep, you too.